good part of the speech. Anyone who uses Canadian airports is familiar with this scene, a long, long line of passengers waiting to go through airport security. Why is the line so slow? In part, it's because the passengers going through screening have to stop to pull their laptop computers from their bags and briefcases, and then place the laptop in its own special tray for inspection. Then they have to put the tiny bottles of shampoo and the tiny tubes of toothpaste into tiny little plastic bags and place them on trays for inspection. They must take off their hoodies and cardigans and suit jackets. If they are wearing boots that go ever so slightly above the ankle, they have to take them off and complete the screening process standing on the cold airport floor in their socks in the hopes that they didn't absent-mindedly put on a pair with holes. If they have a medical piece of equipment, such as a CPAP machine, well, that needs to be pulled out and put into a separate tray, too. Some of these measures may be essential. Others may simply be security theater, a holdover from the panic post 9/11. But as good, polite Canadians, we line up and go through the ritual. And while passengers wait in those long lines, hopping about in their sock feet, they can't help but look over at the lucky, lucky verified travelers whisking their way through the short, swift, verified traveler line, where people can leave their computers in their cases, their toothpaste in their toiletry bags, their cardies buttoned up, and their boots on their feet. And why do verified travelers get this premium speedy treatment? It's because they've gone through a series of background security checks in advance. They are pre-screened not to be terrorists or hijackers or other kinds of threats. And as you stand there in the slow line, you may be wondering, how do I get to be a verified traveler? How do I get to be so special? There are, in fact, 4 classes of Canadians who get to use the good line at the airport. First, serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces, including reservists. Second, RCMP members, as well as most members of provincial and local police forces. Third, pilots, flight attendants, and other air crew members in uniform, as well as any airport employees who carry special restricted area identification cards. But if you are not a soldier, a police officer, a pilot, a passenger agent, there is still one way, only one way, for you as a Canadian to become a verified traveler. You can apply for a NEXUS card. NEXUS is a joint American-Canadian program that lets us cross more easily into the United States. It's ideal for people who do a lot of cross-border business or who work in both countries. Applicants have to go through a security background check and in-person interviews conducted by both the Canada Border Services Agency and U.S. Homeland Security. Now, quite a few of us in this chamber have already jumped through the necessary hoops, paid the necessary fees, and waited and waited and waited for American approval. But it is not a simple process, especially not now. During the first Trump presidency, when COVID hit, the entire NEXUS system ground to a halt, creating waits of years to get a card. Then the U.S. tightened its interview rules. Canadians used to be able to go to any major international airport, such as those in Calgary or Edmonton or Montreal or Toronto or Halifax, to be interviewed by American border officials. You didn't need to fly to the United States. You could just come to the airport. That is no longer the case. You can still go to a major international airport for a security check, but now you actually have to buy a ticket to fly to a U.S. destination before you can be interviewed. And at a time when many Canadians are feeling leery or queasy about visiting Trump's America or are simply boycotting for political reasons, forcing someone to buy a ticket to the United States just so they can get a NEXUS approval seems a bit unfair. Your other option is to drive across the border to complete an interview. That isn't so hard, to be honest, if you live in Vancouver or Montreal or Ottawa, but it's a lot more complicated if you live someplace like Edmonton, which is 6.5 hours to drive to the nearest border crossing in Sweetgrass, Montana. Travel logistics aside, getting an appointment for an interview isn't easy. When I spoke to the CBSA a few months ago, they acknowledged that there were more than 100,000 Canadians waiting for appointments at American border posts. Le processus est plus compliqué si vous êtes francophone. Bien que tous les formulaires de demande américains soient disponibles en anglais, en espagnol et en français, il pourrait être plus difficile d'organiser une entrevue en français avec les agents frontières américains, en particulier en dehors du Québec. This is what the Canadian Border Security System told my office about the possibility of pre-booking an interview with CBSA and Homeland Security officers who do speak French. Quote, "The option to select to do the interview in either of the 2 official languages is dependent on the operational capacity and the availability of interviewing officers. There is no possibility to pre-select the language of your choice. Officers will do their best to accommodate when possible." End quote. Nor is that the only issue. For many Canadians, the very idea of submitting to vetting by Trump's Homeland Security apparatus, of providing the Trump regime with their fingerprints and their retinal scans, is more than a little disquieting. And then in August, a new problem came to light. Due to the Trump government's policies against trans people, new NEXUS cards cannot use an X to mark someone's gender. They can only say either F for female or M for male. And that letter must now match up with the gender a person was assigned at birth. Those currently using a NEXUS card marked with an X can continue to use it for now. But when that card expires, they can only get a renewal if they revert to using the letter that marks their former gender. For trans, two-spirit, gender fluid, or gender non-binary Canadians, that may mean a NEXUS card is simply out of reach. Canadian courts have affirmed that gender identity is a protected ground in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And yet, in order to conform to American bigotry, Canada's only verified traveler program now actively discriminates against any Canadian who doesn't fit into the neat gender binary. And that, to my mind, amounts to a charter violation. And yet, we have no option. It doesn't matter if you're a cabinet minister or diplomat, a senator or a lieutenant governor, a Supreme Court justice, an archbishop, or just a very frequent flyer. Because this isn't just an issue for business executives or political elites. If you fly a lot, whether that's to visit your aged parents, your new grandkids, your long-distance lover, or your favorite holiday spot, if you want to go through the express security line, you need Donald Trump's say-so. It makes no sense, especially since the vast majority of people who apply for NEXUS cards are Canadians, and that many of them, frankly, want to use their card to fly more easily within Canada. The Canadian Border Services Agency briefed my office about the matter this summer. We heard that Canadian applications for NEXUS cards started dropping noticeably last November, right after Trump's second election. It's hard to see that trend reversing anytime soon. And that's a problem for Canadian airports. Without enough verified travelers in the queue, airports can't dedicate the staff to keep the verified traveler lanes open. Already, Ottawa's airport only opens its verified line during limited peak hours. The Canadian Airports Council has been lobbying for years for a made-in-Canada domestic verified traveler card. And now, the Council warns that if we don't have enough verified travelers, the fast lanes may close and security wait times will increase for everyone. Why do we still rely on a country which has threatened our sovereignty to investigate our citizens and to collect and retain their private and biometric information just so that we can transit through Canadian airports? It's not just genderqueer Canadians who are at risk of exclusion. What if the Trump government just doesn't like your politics, your social media posts, your religion, or your skin tone? Why have we surrendered to another country the complete authority to determine which Canadians can be trusted to travel within our own borders? Now, maybe you don't think you need a NEXUS card. Canadians have, after all, dramatically reduced travel to the United States since Trump's annexation threats. But if you want to fly from Edmonton to St. John's and leave your boots on, you must show a NEXUS card. Si vous souhaitez prendre l'avion de Montréal à Paris sans déballer votre dentifrice, vous avez besoin d'une carte NEXUS. C'est vraiment nécessaire? Pourquoi? As it happens, the CBSA already carries out its own parallel background checks in order to issue NEXUS cards. So I have to ask, what is preventing Canada from issuing its own domestic trusted traveler cards to Canadian frequent flyers who have no plans to visit the United States, but who simply wish to fly domestically or overseas with less fuss and bother? Since the CBSA is already doing the background checks and the interviews in both official languages, surely it couldn't be so hard to stand up a sovereign domestic verified travelers program for Canadians, Francophone and Anglophone, that doesn't require Uncle Sam's blessing. I have spoken with both the CBSA and Transport Canada to ask them those very questions. And to be honest, the problem simply seems to be one of bureaucratic, legalistic logistics, figuring out how to transfer the necessary data from one department to the other. Now, of course, we as unelected senators can't compel the government to spend money on a new made-in-Canada trusted traveler program. But I think we are well within our rights to ask that the government investigate the practicality and viability of setting up such a program not to mention the national security and charter risks in failing to do so. It is well past time for us to repatriate control of our airport screening systems and stop contracting out our national security assessments to an increasingly unpredictable and unreliable foreign power. It may cost a bit more, but it will be worth every penny for us to reclaim our national sovereignty, to ensure that every trusted Canadian has the equal right and equal opportunity to access a card, and to ensure that our airports run as smoothly and efficiently as possible to the benefit of Canadian travelers and the Canadian economy. J'espère inspirer certains d'entre vous, mes collègues, à aborder cette question. Et j'espère ensuite que tous nous pourrons soumettre cette motion au vote. Let's tell the government that we want something better, something fairer, a made-in-Canada verified traveler program that respects our language rights, our civil rights, and our national sovereignty. Thank you, merci, and hi-hi.